Among the gifts of a true artist is the ability to see the potential that lies within an ordinary item. One ordinary and necessary item for sewing is a needle. I can't think of any type of sewing which does not use a needle. Today we have so many needle choices to make our sewing more beautiful as well as easier. My guest will show us beautiful things created with different needles. We don't want to miss a thing, so let's begin, shall we? Welcome to my sewing room. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my friend Steve Butler. Steve is a consultant for the Schmetz Needles Company. Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, Martha, thanks for inviting me back. I always love being here to visit with you and to talk about some needle-related sewing type projects. What I'd like to do today, if we can, is talk a little bit about what all of our sewers really want, and that's that perfect stitch and those beautiful seams and how to achieve that. You know, I was reading a magazine article probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the author stated that if you follow these certain rules, you can achieve professional results in your sewing. Well, that really got my curiosity because I was wondering, well, what are professional results in sewing and how does that apply to us and to our sewers? And I came to the conclusion that professional results in sewing is nothing more than mechanically precise stitching done by one individual in front of one machine doing the same project over and over and over. And using that definition, I've decided that doesn't apply to our sewers at all, because our sewers will use a variety of fabrics, a variety of threads, a variety of needles, a variety of patterns on the same project. And whether they're involved in heirloom sewing or quilting or embroidery or even home deck, they actually expect better than professional results. And they measure those results in the quality of every stitch and the quality of all of these seams. So what's the question we have is, how do we get these better than professional results and these quality seams? And I have a fourfold answer for you.
All right.
The first thing is you have to have quality techniques. And what I mean by that is you need to understand your sewing machine. You need to understand how to set it up, and primarily you need to know how to set the tension for that needle, for that thread, and for that fabric, because all three of those work together to form those beautiful stitches for you. The second thing you need to have is quality materials. You need to make sure that you have quality threads and quality fabric. You never save money by using economy materials. You need to have a quality sewing machine. And by that I don't mean that you have to have a top-of-the-line, brand new, expensive machine. But the sewing machine that you do use should be clean and it should be well adjusted so it does everything correctly for you. And the last thing you need is a quality sewing machine needle. And I really feel that the quality sewing machine needle is the most crucial element in all of this, because it's the needle that actually interfaces with the fabric and with the thread. When you think about what it actually does, is it penetrates the fabric, it carries the thread down into the bobbin case area, and then as it raises, it forms that thread loop, which eventually becomes our stitch. So we just need to make sure that we always have a quality needle. So there's another question. What is a quality needle?
That's right.
Well, in previous discussions, we've talked about the type of needles. And there are several types of needles. They have different points and they have different applications for different types of fabrics or different types of sewing. So we need to make sure that we have the right type of needle. We just recently talked about sizes of needles and how that accommodates the threads. So we need to make sure that we have the right size needle to accommodate the thread that we're going to be using. And then we need to make sure that we have a needle that's in good condition. How do you know if a needle's in good condition? Unless you're using a brand new needle, you really don't have a clue. Anytime you use a needle, it starts to wear. When you figure if you sew for 6 or 8 hours with a sewing machine needle, you've done close to 250,000 of stitches.
Wow.
And that's a lot to ask a little piece of wire to do, and that's what the needle is. It's just a little straightened out piece of wire that they've shaped into the needle for us. So here's what I'd recommend to make sure that we always have a quality needle in our machine. Change your needle as a matter of routine. Don't wait until you see it starting to damage your fabric or starting to damage your thread, or even breaks in the worst case. Change it every 6 to 8 hours. If you're sewing on heavy fabric or quilting or something that's more demanding, change it a little more often. If you think you may have damaged your needle, if you think you may have hit a pin, or you think that you may have hit it with some scissors when you were cutting some thread, take it out and change it. Do not take it out and look at it and try to determine if it's still good. If you have perfect 20/20 vision, you still will not be able to tell. And if you have mature vision, like I do,
and me,
you haven't got a chance. You'll find that changing your needle is the easiest, fastest, cheapest way to improve the quality of every single stitch that you make with your sewing machine. And then the last thing I'd like to mention is, if you're to a point in your project where the stitches you're making are particularly visible, say example you're doing pin tucks or applique or some kind of top stitch or buttonholes, put in a brand new needle right then, and you'll make sure that you're going to get those really crisp, clean, perfect stitches. To help us remember this, I'd like to leave an acronym with you,
okay,
if I can. The acronym is TNT, like the explosive, but in our case, the first T stands for thread. Make sure you're using a quality thread. The N stands for needle. Make sure you're using the right needle and make sure that it's in good operating condition. And the second T is the tension on your sewing machine. Make sure the tension is set for that thread, for that needle, and for that fabric. And you'll find that every time we sit down to do a new project, if we think in our minds TNT, we're always going to have dynamite results, better than professional results, and we're going to get those perfect stitches and those beautiful seams that we all want.
I love it, Steve. TNT.
TNT.
Dynamite sewing with TNT. Okay, that is thread, needles, and tension. Well, very important thing. Steve, thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for a TNT presentation.
Well, thank you.
And next I have some designer techniques to share with you. I'm so happy to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Amelia Johanson. Amelia is the associate editor of So Beautiful magazine. Amelia, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here as always.
Cannot wait for you to share with our viewers your brand new technique on this beautiful christening dress.
Well, I don't know if it's brand new. It's an antique innovation, let's say. I was inspired, as I always seem to be anymore, by antique garments. A lot of the fashion garments from the turn of the century, 1900s, had strips of netting that were ruched. And I'm sure it was probably the lace was extremely expensive, so they would just rip off strips of netting and ruche them into a detailed technique. Well, I've decided to use insertion lace, which is much easier and I think makes a prettier effect. And I did it here on this christening gown. Starting at the top, the lace is not ruched. There's some machine embroidery on netting and a matching trim that matches actually an antique trim that I found after I had ruched the lace that matches the same effect. And we come down here and this is what I'm talking about. It's it's lace shaping with a ruched lace, and because the ruche is lace, it makes the lace shaping really easy to do because you're not having to pull any threads. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Basically, we start with, I like a 5/8 inch width of lace. It just fits beautifully under the presser foot. So we start with that, and I'll move over, and you need, some machines have a basting stitch already set up. We've put a basting stitch on here about a 5 width, and the more you increase the tension and increase the length of the stitch, the more it will ruche. And so we just set it right under the presser foot. It ruches up as it comes.
Stitching right down
right
the middle.
down the center
right
of that
down
lace,
the center.
which fits right under the presser foot. So it just makes a nice ruched effect. And here we're going to end up with a big long strip of lace. And it pretty much, with this width, will it's a 2-to-1 ratio basically. So you're going to need a lot of lace depending on how much you do. Then you're going to line your netting. We're putting it on netting on this is a beautiful lace shaping board that already has the shapes in place, so you don't even have to trace off. Just make sure your netting is lined. Put your gathered ruched lace and lay your glass head pins. You want to use glass head pins because you're going to press this, and we're just going to continue around these loops, and you're going to lose a lot of pins because you're not going to want this to move once you've got it pinned. So we'll have this, basically you're going to pin this all the way around and continue going. And I have the finished product here, so you'll see it's all flat. We've pressed it down with the point of an iron on those glass head pins because they won't melt. And you can pretty much pick it up and move it, and it's not going to move for you. Now you're going to go back to your machine, and at this point, let's take this out of here, switch to a regular straight stitch, and take this, again, fit it right under that foot, and straight stitch right again, right over your basting stitch line.
Are you using any stabilizer at all?
You can. I didn't have any trouble. I
Okay.
really didn't. But if you feel more comfortable, you can use a regular straight stitch. This is still long, so we're going to reduce it to a regular straight stitch. You're not going to want to gather because it's going to gather up again. So we'll go back down to, say, a 2.5 stitch, and just again stitch it right down the center. We're going to pull your pins out. First rule of sewing. So you're not going to hit your pins, but just carefully stitch down the center and pull that out.
Attach it to your knitting.
And then we'll go back to our handy dandy samples here, and here we have it attached to our knitting. And here's our, here's our finished product with, attached to the knitting. And then you can do with it, like, we put it on the skirt, you can put it on a blouse. The really neat thing.
So pretty.
Well, it makes a nice airy
I have never
effect.
seen this in the whole 27 years I have been.
Something new.
It is something new. Something
it,
old is always something new.
And again,
that's wonderful.
Back to this lace. When you're going to pick a lace for netting, you're going to want an airy netting type lace. So it has that kind of airy feeling, which is really nice with this. And this was the trim. That was the antique trim, as you can see, which was just a beautiful find that matched the loops, same effect of the loops. And
I also love the fact that this is a velvet.
It's a velvet. It's a winter.
It's a winter
gown.
North of the Mason-Dixon line.
That's where I live, so it's a great
It's in
christening gown for cold
Ohio.
weather.
Yeah, it's a great one for cold weather because sometimes babies are christened in the winter.
They are indeed.
Amelia, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful
welcome.
idea and this beautiful velvet christening dress. And now we have some hand embroidery for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest my dear friend Beverley Sheldrick from New Zealand. Beverley is an internationally recognized author and teacher. And Beverley, it is just so wonderful to have you back.
Oh, thank you, Martha. It's just wonderful being here, as always. Martha, today, for our viewers, I would like to demonstrate pansies.
Oh.
Now, I'm rather fond of pansies myself.
Me too.
And they're not difficult, Martha. But what is the difficult part I find that students struggle with is, quite honestly, it's length. It's the length of the little straight stitches that they're going to take, because it is only straight stitches. So I'll just quickly run through for you. You will see here that we have these two little bunny's ears. They're just a little V like that, very simple. Then you'll see that there are two little side stitches, one in each side, like that, and I do normally do them in another colour. And you will just notice that they're just there like that, a little bit shorter, a little bit of puff in them. Now the last two are again another pair of rabbit's ears, this time of course going down, but you'll also notice that they are a little closer together. Here the V is more pronounced than what it is here. So these two stitches here are the longest of those two stitches. And then you will see, last but not least, I've got just a little French knot in the middle. It's done with thread. It doesn't matter what you, either two strands of stranded cotton, or you can, whatever you like to use, floche, something like that. But it just fills the little hole that you get in the centre there. And when you think about it, pansies do have lovely little eyes in the middle, don't they? So here we are. We've got our thread already. I'm going to put in, first of all, the first part of the V, like so, and then I'm coming back and I'm going to put in the second one there, like that. Just keep it straight like that. Then I'm moving to my second one and I'm going out to the side like that, just a little short puffy stitch like that. And remember, of course, that you are leaving a little hole in the middle there, like that. And there we are, like that. You can see how I usually take it over my finger to keep it like that. And then here we are at the last one, which again, as I said before, you can see that it is a little longer than the other two sets. And I'm coming up again. You'll notice that I'm putting my finger on the ribbon there, and that just keeps it flat. And when I pull it through, I'm not going to pull it too tight, because as I said, we are going to have just a little bit of extra length and a little bit of bounce in it, like that. Now, last but not least, we've got to put that little eye in it here, and you can see I've got a little bit of a thread here. 1, 2, 3 wraps, and just pop that in there, pull it tight before you take it through. If you remember to just pull it tight, then you will find that you won't get a sloppy knot. If you've ever done that and it's all loopy instead of sitting firmly there. And I'm just going to take that through to the back there like that. And there we have our pansy. Now, if you were wanting to put a stem on it, then you would bring the stem up here like this, and then just bring it up like that and bring it round and down like that. But it's not essential to have stems, and if you look at the gown that you'll see, I have actually put them in clumps. If you look at the booties here, you will see that I have actually put the stems around and down like that. Again, leaves are not essential. You can, if you want to, put some random ones at the bottom, but I often don't worry at all. It's such a pretty flower.
And what stitch did you use for the stem stitch?
For the stems, it is just a stem stitch or an outline stitch.
Stem stitch or an outline stitch.
Of course, as we know, depending on whichever direction we want it to go as to which we call it.
Beverly, thank you so much. And I, like you, love pansies.
They're such pretty flowers.
And now I have a home decorating project to share with you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today, Erin Hardin. Erin is a designer from Martha Pulling Company. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. It's so wonderful to be here. Today I'm going to go over some bias binding techniques where you incorporate or include a trim into the bias. Biases are wonderful ways to finish the edges of projects, and we've got them used here in this dress, and then also
this cute little dress, and the pocket is so adorable.
Yes, we've got a little trim, a little scalloped edge trim included in the pocket of the dress.
And right here at the top.
Mm-hmm. And
then, how sweet.
And then this is another little trim, and this is the technique that I'm going to go over today, what we've used on the diaper stacker. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is you've got the fabric that you're going to finish the edge, and then I've got a 2-inch piece of bias because I want my finished bias to be about 1/4 of an inch. And then I've got my trim. I've starched and pressed all these pieces, and especially I wanted to starch and press my trim because it'll pre-shrink it and prep it to be added into the project. So now I have threaded my machine with wash-away thread. That's kind of the little trick of this technique. It's going to take out some of the guesswork when we add the bias to incorporate this little trim. And so if you see right here, I've got this stitched down with the blue thread, and that represents my wash away. I did that for TV purposes. And so I've got my trim stitched to my fabric, and now you're going to take your bias and you're going to add it on top. Now, by the way, this was a 1/4 inch seam right here. And so you add your bias on top, and then you're going to flip this over. And if you'll see, now remember, this is my wash away thread, but this is the stitch line that's holding that trim in place. So you're going to, with all 3 layers and a regular thread, you've removed your wash away, you've put it back into your baggie. You're going to stitch down right over this line right here. And that's what I've got. You'll see that I've got a different color thread, and I've just stitched all through all 3 of these layers. And so when you flip this back, you can see these threads showing through. Now remember, that's wash away. So all you have to do is wet it and it'll disappear. You can do it with a spray bottle, or you can even use an envelope wetter. And you would just go along and you would wet, and all that thread that's showing through on that trim is just going to disappear. So when you press the bias up, you've just got a clean finish with your trim. And if you'll look on the back side, all we've got is the one line of stitching, which is going through all of these layers. And when you trim this seam allowance, you're going to fold your bias back so that it goes just beyond, just a tad bit beyond that stitch line. And you'll fold it in place, and then you can use a monofilament, an invisible thread, and you can just stitch right in the ditch right here, and it'll go through all layers. It won't be seen from the front side, and on the back it's going to just catch this fold. And that's all you have to do, and you'll have a clean finished edge.
A clean and a perfect finished edge.
That's right.
I love your idea of using that wash away basting thread and making it perfect and having a cheating line on the back.
I know, we like to
Erin,
cheat.
there's such wonderful techniques and beautiful projects. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to share a piece from my vintage collection with you. This little dress is simply spectacular. I believe I bought this in England, if my memory serves me correct. It just has so many details, and you can see, for one thing, we have the beautiful little squared neckline with entredot and insertion and entredot. This beautiful little Swiss trim, which really has triple entredot, tiny baby entredot, and then more insertion and that beautiful little row of triple entredot Swiss trim, this time running vertically, this time running horizontally. Speaking of horizontal, look at these adorable, maybe not even inch long release tucks that makes that almost a little puffing effect in the middle. The entredot is set in with the sleeves, the little double row, well no, actually it's the triple row again, of Swiss trim, and then come down and look at the skirt. It has 2 little tucks, 2 little tucks, 2 little tucks, and that beautiful little Swiss insertion, and another strip of batiste, and the little insertion, and a beautiful hem. I have a wonderful sewing from the heart for you today, and I'm going to turn it around here so you can see the picture of the soldiers. And I'm going to hold it here and read it to you. This is just really fascinating. Dear Martha, Rose Beeson, head of our upstate group, suggested we write you. We're a nonprofit organization that makes darn-it dolls for soldiers. In the last 3 years, we've shipped over 16,000 dolls all over the world. The dolls are free and only for our soldiers. According to the emails we receive, they work and bring many smiles. They're nothing special. Just simple rag dolls made from scraps and bargains, found on sale and filled with love and appreciation for our young people serving our country. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, so we've attached one along with our poem. I love this with soldiers holding their darn-it dolls. And this is from Carol Davis, founder and CEO of Operation Military Stress Relief Doll Incorporated, West Columbia, South Carolina. And this is the poem they send our soldiers. When your day is stressful and you want to scream and shout, here's a little darn-it doll that you can't live without. Grasp it firmly by its legs and find a place to bang it. And as you whack its stuffing out, yell, darn it, darn it, darn it. Thank you for serving our country so honorably, from your friends in South Carolina. Now, isn't that an exciting project to send those little darn-it dolls? 16,000 they've sent. Thank you so much, Carol, and your group, and thank you, all of our military men and women, for taking care of us. I would like to say come back next time.